Warning, this video will contain spoilers. If you care about game lore or want the full experience of Code Vein for yourself, turn off the video now.
Buddy, you brought a hammer to a sword fight? Fucking cringe.
The Souls games are notoriously challenging, giving even the most hardcore fan a bit of a struggle. From annoying enemy types to absolute bullshit mechanics, these games are notorious for light attacking, rolling, dying, and screaming, in that order. Code Vein is no different. Bandai Namco have hit the nail on the head when it comes to replicating the Souls genre. Code Vein is a combination of brilliant visuals, intense boss fights, fun customization, great original soundtracks, voice acting, and interesting and engaging stories. I really think Bandai Namco did a good job in taking core gameplay from the Dark Souls games, which were developed by From Software and published by Namco themselves, and incorporating it into Code Vein. The game feels crisp, hardly dropping frames in massive areas with lots of world detail, even when there's a bunch of enemies on screen and particles flying everywhere. As well as trying to render Io's, personality. While doing all this, no frames are dropped within the world. So let's dissect Code Vein and examine what makes it so good and worth a purchase. There's a lot of lore in the story, so let's try and explain everything that happens. Towering skyscrapers known as Thorns of Judgment have pierced the world around you, bringing destruction to a world that once relished them as prosperous items. This event, known as the Great Collapse, has spawned monsters that began rampaging around the world. As a countermeasure, the humans created revenants, human corpses brought back to life by implanting a parasite within their hearts. Due to this implant, humans become vampires that utilize unique abilities to fight these monsters. However, it's not as good as it seems. Revenants can die. These revenants can have their hearts pierced, killing the parasite as well as the host. Sort of like the traditional vampires that have been shown throughout movies and TV shows. You know, the stake through the heart thing. Revenants also require human blood, just like traditional vampires. But if they don't receive this nourishment, they frenzy, turning into a Lost. A cannibalistic being devoid of any reason and control, attacking anything that moves. Over time, Lost numbers increased, giving way to deadly miasma that accelerates the effect of frenzying, thus creating more Lost. A young girl known as Cruz Silva volunteers to become the Queen of the Revenants. Unfortunately for the remaining population, Cruz frenzies and goes on a rampage. In reaction to this, more Revenants are created to deal with Cruz. Although Cruz is eventually defeated in operation known as Queenslayer, the Lost and the miasma still remain, and grow in alarming rates due to the lack of an alternate blood source known as blood beads. This leads the Revenants to develop a technological breathing apparatus to filter the miasma and avoid turning into the Lost. Your character, who previously remembers fighting as part of Operation Queenslayer, awakes to the ensuing disaster that has left the world in utter chaos. When you wake up, you realize you are surrounded by a red ring of fog, sort of like a red mist, that doesn't allow anything to leave or enter, essentially sealing the city inside prison walls. Upon waking up, you are also introduced to a girl in white known as Io that leads you to a mysterious looking plant, and reveals you have the power to clear miasma from an area, also bringing spawn to blood beads. You and Io then meet up with Lewis. After demonstrating your ability to clear miasma and spawn blood beads, he invites you and Io to travel around with him and many others to search for more blood springs and bring an end to revenant hunger, and spare the humans, who up to this point were being herded like cattle and being forced to give blood or killed. And so you set off into the unknown, and battle through Lost and monsters in search of your goal. Do you and your friends make it along the way and find what you're looking for? Or is there a darker secret underlying the horrors above? Who knows, you'll have to buy the game and see for yourself. Most of the story I read out above is story that's explained quite early in the game. Emphasis on most. So the majority of the story is still unexplained by me. Intentionally, obviously, I want you to buy the game and play it. The story isn't really like anything I've seen in games before to my knowledge. I guess if I'm wrong you'll let me know, but just recollecting, I can't think of any game that has a story like it. From the get-go I was wondering why I was getting flashbacks of a random girl and what my connection to her is. Then seeing the chaos around me, I was wondering what the fuck exactly happened here and why a very wide-eyed girl wasn't wearing any clothes. Seriously, yeah, put some fucking clothes on. The story just kinda gripped me instantly and really helped me power on to learn more about the world and lore behind it. I can't say that everyone that gets the game will be interested in the lore and the backstory, but in general, for me at least, I was hooked. Around the world there are little collectibles that you can give to your companions to get little audible insights into the world before the Great Collapse, which is a nice touch, instead of games in recent memories that lock story behind 4 different menus. Division. Anyway, I do believe that's all for the story, so I'm gonna move on to the gameplay of the game. Code Vein is tagged on Steam as a Souls-like JRPG anime action game, and I can't really disagree with any of that. It pretty much explains the base gameplay very well. Imagine Dark Souls, but with a lot of anime screaming and moaning. Attacks register nicely, rolling is smooth, dashing is really nice and has good particle effects to accompany it. Backstabs are nice and respond appropriately, however they are a bit easier to pull off than the Dark Souls series, and companions all have individual personalities that makes them memorable. Carrying on with the characters, the only downside that I can think of is the fact that they don't really shut the fuck up. Everything you do in the game, from like climbing or engaging an enemy to going near a ledge, will have some sort of annoying quip alongside it. When I say this happens all the time, I'm not lying. I wish for just 1 second that the AI would shut up and let me think for myself instead of being constantly reminded of objectives or dangers. I'm playing a Souls like there's danger everywhere. Other than that, all the AI you can partner up with are unique and individual enough so that each one stands on their own 2 feet. All of the AI have unique attack patterns and abilities that they can share with you. Obviously a lot of time was just spent making the AI rememberable, apart from the ones that Bandai couldn't give a shit about and didn't name, such as Arrogant Revenant. Just like A Hat in Time, your character is completely mute up until the end of the game depending on which ending you'll get, which I'll come to later. Again, like A Hat in Time, the lead developers clearly thought about emotion and expression, giving your characters a wide range of facial expressions, not only in cutscenes but outside in standard gameplay. Little things like this add on top of your custom character and allow you to connect with them more. Moving on to controls. Code Vein has a total of 29 separate controls between each platform that the game is available on. These are what you can see on screen now, giving you a lot of options when it comes to abilities and maneuverability, which is nice. The controls kind of just explain themselves, so I'll move on to the number of endings, which I briefly talked about before. So, in total there are 4 separate endings that you can individually affect via the choices you make throughout the story. The first ending is the bad ending, shocker. Known as the Heirs ending, you acquire this by killing all 4 of the successors and simply walk out of the successor's Vestige memory sequence. If you don't restore the successors' memories after defeating them, you get a unique blood code only available in the bad type ending. The second ending is the neutral ending, known as the Eternity ending. You get this by saving at least 1 successor's memory. To do this, you need to collect all the vestiges leading up to the boss fight in that given area. You know you'll need to restore them as there'll be a little EO clone that shows up on the door of the boss. Then there's the third ending, the good ending, known as Dweller in the Dark. You acquire this by saving all the successors and restoring their memories. To get this ending, you'll have to collect all the vestiges in all of the areas that has an EO clone right before the boss, and restoring them at that EO clone. The fourth ending is a play on the Dweller in the Dark ending that includes an additional cutscene with EO. To get this ending, you have to return to the area where the EO clones are and pick up the EOS vestiges dropped by them. Then just simply go back to EO at the base and restore them with her. That kinda does it for the endings, so yeah. I think the only bad thing about this game, other than the constant dialogue from the AI, is the discreet clipping on clothes and accessories. It's not ridiculously game-breaking and won't lead you to clipping out of the world, but it's definitely noticeable. So let's talk about the weaponry and armor, as well as the skills, or blood codes as they are known in the game. In Code Vein, there are 5 categories of weapons. These include the one-handed swords, of which there are 16 different variations, including a pipe. A fucking pipe! The two-handed swords, which have 14 variations. The spears, halberds, and polearms that have 13 variations. The two-handed hammers, which also have 13 variations, and the bayonet rifles that have 12 variations. Altogether that comes to 68 different weapons you can use in Code Vein, and each weapon has different stats and movesets. Armor sets are known as blood veils, and all have different stats as well as unique drain attacks, such as the claw drain attack or the spike. Each blood veil can be changed at any time, and each drain attack has its own parry animation, leaving enemies open to a front drain attack and dealing massive damage. Depending on what blood veil you choose will depend on your drain type and how much damage the attack will do. The armors and weapons are both animated pristinely and look gorgeous. Every swing of a one-handed sword feels fast, just like how every swing of a hammer feels like it would crush the entire continent of New Zealand. The weapons just work nicely, and the armor affects builds, resulting in you possibly changing your playstyle along the way. Right, onto blood codes, Code Vein's class system. Instead of having a standard starting class system, Code Vein has these blood codes. Blood codes allow players to freely interchange skills between different classes, meaning that the variety for skills is never lacking. You can unlock more blood codes just by progressing through the game, but the majority of blood codes will be unlocked through vestiges. Blood codes affect your character's action skills, so like slashing attacks, gifts, which is pretty much magic, and stats for different approaches to areas or bosses. You start with 3 blood codes, the fighter, the ranger, and the caster, and like I said, the more you progress, the more blood codes you unlock. Jesus Christ, that took a while to get through. Right, we'll do visuals next. God, I need some water.
It seems everyone, everywhere is thirsty.
I understand that the majority of people don't really like anime, and I understand that not everyone will like the visuals of Code Vein because of that fact. However, everything other than your character and the AI you meet is strictly non-anime. I do think this is intentionally done to widen the audience that the game appeals to. Each level is unique and stands out in a sea of visually brilliant games. Take the Cathedral of the Sacred Blood for instance. It has heavy influences from Anor Londo, but has been changed in such a way so that the only thing you can say is that it resembles it. It takes the labyrinth feel from Anor Londo and rearranges it to make it even more of a mindfuck. Each level is visually stunning, like I said, from the cathedral all the way down to the Howling Pits, a city that was buried underground due to the Great Collapse. Its dense fog really makes you feel like you are trapped in this area just like the city itself is trapped, bringing an almost lifelike ominous feel to it. The game balances visuals and performance very nicely, and when performance does drop, it's only when you're loading into a new area. The game doesn't really have loading screens unless you're teleporting to a previous location. All the levels are loaded in by walking down a winding cove, unloading the previous area and loading the new area in, all in one motion. Onto the absolute monolith that is the character creation menu.
Can you hear me? Think back. Search your memory for an image of yourself.
Individuality is very important in games, be it from builds or simply how your character looks. Code Vein excels in both these features, but specifically the character creation. This menu has so much customization in it, it makes LEGO jealous. You can use preset customizations as a baseline or use them for your final character, but I don't think anyone is lazy enough to use them as your character, so onto the other sections of the menu. You can change pretty much anything to do with your character, including eye color, whether or not you want heterochromia, hairstyles, eyebrows, and the most important last, what the game calls overall balance, or what I call the personality meter. All of these options add individuality to your character, so unless someone is copying you accurately, their character will always be different. The game also has a cool feature that lets you import other people's characters, so if you find someone else's character that piques your interest, you can simply import it into your game. Armor is unique, utilizing colors and designs to separate each blood veil. There are blood veils that fall under the same name as the original, the others are just variations on that original. However, the variations have different stats, meaning that a blood veil variation might not be good for your build. The blood veils in this game just look very nice and flow uniquely. You can have a really long sleeved blood veil or a blood veil without any sleeves to begin with. Just remember what blood veil you do pick may impact your build a bit, but if you only care about visuals then it's fine. Weapons are interesting and instantly recognizable, which is obviously a good thing. Every boss weapon also has a unique heavy attack that is visually pleasing, with a wide array of particles. Hammers blow up portions of the ground and have concrete or any other material flying up from the point of impact, just like how swords leave a streak where the sword is actually swung from. Overall, graphically the game really appeals to me, and I just love the overall aesthetic of it. I was instantly drawn into the world firstly because of the story and curiosity, but also the visuals. Right, swiftly moving on from visuals and on to sound design. The Dark Souls games have amazing sound design all around. Code Vein is no different. Right from the main menu you are barraged with a vocal choir. With their descending vocals, you immediately know you aren't gonna have a good time. Not because the game's bad, but because you are gonna die. A lot. With brilliant sounds all around, rolling, dodging, and attack are all paired to your character's specific voice, so each playthrough with a different character will have different voices. Each level also has its own unique soundtrack and fits every scenario. From intense boss fights all the way down to just exploring, the music is excellently crafted for any area you are in. Swords make a very nice slashing sound when hitting enemies, and hammers sort of make a thudding sound, obviously, because it's a big hammer. Even when utilizing skills, you have an audible trigger that lets you know you've activated them, as well as a visual trigger. There are 22 originally composed songs in Code Vein, and each song is exquisitely used in different scenarios. Overall sounds are just what you'd expect from a Souls-like, with movement and weaponry, but Code Vein takes it up a notch with a brilliant score to accompany amazing visuals. Characters are voice acted to a nice degree and adds a sense of realism to the character, so long as you can get past the gigantic eyes. Each character actually has a personality, and this is largely due to the voice actors. I really can't praise them enough. Some lines are stereotypically anime, but everything else fits in nicely with the context of the game. I know I don't have much to say about the sound design, however whatever I have said is excellent in its own respects. There isn't really anything bad to say about the sound design, so let's just move on to the pros and cons of the game. If you couldn't tell up until this point, the pros heavily outweigh the cons, so let's start with the pros. The story instantly gripped me from the beginning, making me want to learn a lot more about the lore of the game and learn more about the world around me. Like I said previously, as soon as you wake up you are greeted by a world that has had chaos strip the lands of any populace. It just drew me in instantly, trying to learn more about the world and why this happened. Weapons are fast and fluid and have simulated weight. Blunt objects have impact and heft when you swing them, just like how one-handeds have a sort of quick movement to them. Blood veils and blood codes are diverse enough to allow a lot of build diversity, and offer different things for different playstyles. The game is visually appealing, at least to me. World design is expertly made to give a sense of a lived-in city, just before the Great Collapse happened. Character design is great and each character actually has a personality instead of being a brick wall of nothingness. Voice acting is done really well and each voice actor brings their own personality into each character, making them feel alive. The music is perfectly used in every scenario, leaning towards the more fantasy choir type of music. Performance of the game is very good and frames are hardly dropped when fighting enemies or even big bosses. Right, now onto the cons of the game. There aren't that many cons, but they are there, so I do have to cover them for a fair and honest review. Right, first of all, certain accessories clip through your character's body, such as pretty much any head accessory. Characters don't shut the fuck up, and the majority of people will just turn AI dialogue off in the settings. The tiny amount of frame drops you do get are noticeable and definitely ruin immersion. However, like I previously said, this is only when you're loading a new area, so I guess it's really not much of an issue. And I mean, you are playing a game with anime characters, so I guess immersion was broke from the get-go. That's it for pros and cons, so fun is up next. I don't know if you could tell already, but I had a really good time playing this game. I was able to become extremely curious about the whole Great Collapse event and why I'm able to clear miasma from areas. Characters add a lot more to the game than some people might realise, and it definitely shows inside Code Vein. I can still remember a lot of the characters in the game due to them all having personalities, partly because of the voice actors and partly because of the characters themselves and how they were made. Through all of my first playthrough, I was going through all the vestiges and learning about each area as much as I could. The world just really drew me in. Swordplay is fun and responsive. Because it's a Souls-like, every boss is interesting and challenging, making each one of your movements important. I just really like the game and I hope it constantly receives new content, forever expanding, adding lore and detail to the world. And then obviously depending on what ending you got, what awaits your characters and friends you make along the way after the main story ends. The game is just good and I can't really put it any other way. If you haven't bought the game yet, then I highly suggest you do. and hopefully my words can sway you into buying it, but if not, then that's okay too. The final rating might actually surprise people because it's not a 10 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, it's a good game, but it has problems. Fair enough, the problems aren't game breaking, but some are immersion breaking, and immersion is just as important as gameplay. So my final rating will be an 8 out of 10. Please buy the game for yourself. What it does get right, it gets right perfectly. That's pretty much everything I have to say about Code Vein, so I'll let the outro do the talking for me. Right, thank you for watching my Code Vein review. If you could subscribe and drop a like, that would be very much appreciated. Hopefully I can sway your choices, but if not, then who am I to complain? At the end of the day, I really appreciate you watching this, and hopefully you'll stay around and watch whatever shitpost I put out next. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.